Decoding the genius method. All right, let's just dive right into this. Look, I know a ton of you watching are incredibly driven learners. You're putting in the time, right? You really care about your results. But we need to talk about a deeply, deeply frustrating reality today. Have you ever spent hours, maybe like an entire weekend, just locked in your room, studying, doing literally everything you think you're supposed to do, and yet crickets? You just aren't seeing the results? That frustration of putting in those massive hours without a payoff is just incredibly heavy. And if you're dealing with that right now, honestly, I want you to know you are absolutely not alone.
Think about this exact scenario for a second. You spend a whole weekend highlighting practically every second line of this massive, dense textbook. You feel super productive, but then you sit down at the exam, you look at that first page, and nothing. Your brain goes completely blank. Honestly, it's a gut-wrenching feeling. It's like you're putting in all this physical work, all this sweat equity, but someone completely forgot to give you the secret code to actually make that information stick when it matters most.
So before we go any further, let's run a quick diagnostic because I really want you to understand your own habits a bit better here. I'm going to throw 5 quick questions at you to diagnose your current study situation. Okay, number 1, not smart enough for top grades. Like, do you honestly believe deep down that you just don't have the brains for those top-tier marks? It's this massive burden of self-doubt that so many really hardworking students carry around, basically assuming there's this invisible ceiling on their potential.
Or how about number 2? Are you busy all day but can't explain what you actually learned? Seriously, do you feel like you're grinding away from morning till night, but if someone just stopped you and said, hey, explain that concept to me, you'd completely freeze up? That gap between the exhausting feeling of just being constantly busy and actually having real communicable comprehension, man, that is one of the most frustrating traps you can fall into.
Question 3, testing feels so uncomfortable you just reread notes. Look closely at your daily habits for a second. Does the very idea of taking a practice test feel so confronting, so uncomfortable, that you just kind of default to endlessly rereading your notes instead? We really need to ask ourselves if avoiding that momentary discomfort is actually the exact thing sabotaging our long-term retention.
Moving to number 4, think natural geniuses just have a better brain? When you look around at those classmates who just seem to get it instantly, do you automatically assume they were somehow born with better hardware than you? Do you look at their success and just chalk it up to some inborn talent rather than a learned, repeatable skill?
And finally, question 5, which is perhaps the heaviest burden of all. Are you terrified of burning out before you succeed? Like, are you secretly scared that no matter how hard you push yourself, no matter how many hours you log at your desk, you're just going to completely burn out before you ever reach that level of success? That relentless hard work mixed with this constant, underlying fear of inevitable exhaustion, it's incredibly draining.
Now, if any of those questions hit a little too close to home just now, I want you to slow down for a second, just take a breath, and really internalize this quote. The problem is not you. Let that provide some immense emotional relief right now. Seriously, it is not your IQ, it's not your personality, and it is certainly not that you are lazy. Your struggles are simply due to a broken system. You've been using a methodology that was literally never designed for how your brain actually operates.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it shows the roadmap to fixing that broken system. And the exact steps for this roadmap are found in a totally game-changing book called How to Study Like a Genius. In this explainer, we're going to break down the core principles from this book. It's really the ultimate solution for anyone who is just sick and tired of feeling stuck in that endless cycle of maximum work for minimal results. So, let's start dismantling those myths we just diagnosed. We're looking at time spent versus learning done. The book makes it super clear that genius-level learning has almost nothing to do with having a sky-high IQ. It's entirely about using efficient systems. You see, most of us fall right into the trap of confusing time spent with learning done. But think about it. Sitting at a desk staring at a book for 6 hours means absolutely nothing if your brain is just in a passive state the whole time.
So what exactly do we mean by passive studying? Well, as defined here, passive studying involves techniques that create a fake sense of familiarity. Things you're probably very used to, like rereading notes or highlighting text. The book warns that these methods are actually pretty dangerous. Why? Because your brain sees the bright yellow highlighted text, recognizes the words, and basically tricks you into thinking, oh yeah, I know this. But because it's a completely passive activity, that fragile familiarity vanishes the absolute second you're put under the intense pressure of a real exam.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core conflict we faced at our desks every day: fake familiarity versus active struggle. It's the comfortable illusion of highlighting battling against the highly effective, yet definitely uncomfortable struggle of active testing. We avoid testing ourselves because it instantly exposes our knowledge gaps, right? And psychologically, spotting those gaps feels like a massive failure. But honestly, we have to completely flip how we view that friction.
Because here is the absolutely crucial mindset shift you have to make today. If it feels easy, you probably aren't learning much. The book shows that the literal struggle you feel when you force yourself to recall information is the exact mechanism that strengthens your memory. If your study session feels cozy and easy, you aren't really growing. Avoiding the test just hides your gaps until it's way too late. That struggle, it isn't a sign of failure. It's actually the biological sign of learning.
And that brings us to the genius system. This system proves, without a doubt, that skill beats talent every single time. Those smart students you might be envying, they weren't born with magically superior memories. They simply rely on active, efficient skills. They take massive amounts of information and break it down into small, manageable chunks. And instead of cramming it all in at 2 a.m. the night before, they systematically space out their reviews over time. It's a reliable, repeatable system, not some sort of genetic superpower.
Now, let's look at the actual science behind why the alternative, cramming, fails so spectacularly. It all comes down to working memory, which is the brain's extremely limited capacity to hold information at any one time. When you try to cram an entire semester's worth of info into your head all at once, you completely overload this limited capacity. It's like trying to pour a gallon of water into a tiny cup. This overload leads directly to a total attention collapse, and ultimately, that dreaded burnout. You don't need to study all day. You need methods that actually respect your brain's biological limits.
Let's move to and see how this builds into a much larger psychological truth about how we learn. Passive safety versus active growth. Passive studying feels incredibly safe, doesn't it? It's so comfortable to just sit there with a warm cup of coffee and a highlighter, never really challenging yourself. But real growth? That requires active retrieval. You have to force your brain to pull that information out, not just passively stare at it on a page. And crucially, you have to pair that active struggle with sleep and recovery, because downtime is when those memories are actually cemented and truly stick. So the crucial point is this stark contrast right here. 8 versus 2. It's 8 agonizing hours versus 2 highly focused hours. It's a really profound paradox when you look at the sheer volume of hours you spend studying versus the actual grades you get at the end of the day. You have the potential to learn absolutely anything, literally anything, but you have to stop fighting your brain's natural mechanics and start working alongside them. Which brings us to our final question for this explainer. 8 hours for B or 2 hours for an A? Which would you actually feel more guilty about? I want you to really genuinely think about that. Are you maybe a little addicted to the struggle of logging those 8 long hours, even when it's clearly not working? Well, it's time to let go of that guilt. It's time to abandon the broken system and finally learn how to study like a genius.